today I'm going to be doing this video a little bit different than I usually do. In the past I've just done a straight through video showing off the watch, but if you follow me on Instagram, I have kind of opened it up to recommendations, and an overwhelming majority said that they would prefer to kind of hear my thoughts, hear my opinions on these watches. So I figured I'd give that a shot. I'll try it a couple of times, gauge for response, and if you all prefer, I'll go back to the other way, or I'll stick around doing this. So in short, I'll be kind of talking a little bit about the watch, the brand, my opinions on both, and doing the usual thing that I usually do. There are some timestamps in the description. If y'all want to jump ahead and kind of not hear me talk, you're free to do so. I decided to kind of do this video on a kind of controversial watch and a controversial brand. So today I'm looking at the Movado Bold. The actual reference number is always a mouthful, so if you don't want to look at it, here it is. Obviously, I bought this pre-owned. I'm not sure if it's discontinued. I'm not sure if it's just sold out everywhere, but I had seen it a while back, and I was after it for a while, and I found one on eBay. I paid $90 for this, and I'll talk a little bit about what specifically I like about this watch, what I don't, and the brand. And that really does go back quite some time. I think they were founded in the late 1800s, and from there up to a couple of decades ago, they were quite reputable, at least from a horological standpoint. They produced some pretty good watches. They had a lot of mechanical movements. I think in the 80s or 70s there was some sort of collaboration with Zenith, the brand, and they were just a very reputable brand. Within the last few decades, though, they have kind of transformed their image to that of a mall brand, I guess you can say. And I don't mean that derogatorily, I really don't. But they have transferred to kind of focus more on the looks of the watch rather than the actual movements inside. In the last few decades, they kind of moved strictly to quartz movements, and from what I understand, run-of-the-mill quartz movements too. So nothing inherently wrong with quartz, but these watches are nothing to really brag about. They've really relied heavily on marketing to try to position themselves as a high-end luxury brand for the non-watch enthusiast. And I think that really is the case for most people. If you ask almost anyone that knows nothing about watches, they will say that Movado is kind of a luxury brand. You do have some famous people who wear these watches and also help push that idea, but in general, that's a quick history of the brand and kind of where they stand today. Right now, most of these watches, especially the quartz ones, they will run you a good $300, $400, $500 depending on the specific watch. They are very popular for their museum line. Now, this is certainly an example of a museum line watch, but this is a Movado Bold. As you can see in the case back here, very large. The Bold is kind of a take of the museum line. Essentially it is that it's a bolder iteration of it. I do have a couple of non-bold watches. These are just strictly museum ones. These are very old and very beat up, so please excuse that. But this is essentially what has made the brand very popular and very famous. They're very minimalistic. They don't have hash markers, and they tend to be gold or silver with the single marker in the 12 o'clock position, and that's really about it. They're very popular and very minimalistic. So the Bold line has kind of taken on this design and made it bolder. Obviously, here's another example of something a little bit more flashy. Again, it's very beat up. Please excuse that. But as you can see, they're very similar watches. And if you look at the Bold, you could certainly see the resemblance in it. You could see the DNA that's in there, while just being bigger, bolder, and having more color attached to it. But the museum line is certainly one that the brand has kind of written for the longest time, and you're not going to find very many popular models that aren't these. They have transferred into, I believe in the last few years, they started developing some mechanical watches of the museum line, which is impressive. But at the price point, I'm not a fan of it. I think they start running to the $600-$700 price range, and I think at that price range you could find a lot of better things in terms of bang for your buck. So this specific watch caught my attention, not just because I've personally been a big fan of the brand for quite a while. I've been a big fan, and I tend to stay away from them just because they're too minimalistic, and I've never really found a bold watch that has caught my attention. So if we really start looking deep into this, what is it particular that I like about it? First of all, obviously the minute hand, the hour hand, and the second hand. They do have, it seems to be kind of like an outline. They do remind me of the Ming watches. That you can totally see a resemblance to that. You have a purple outline around the chapter ring here that kind of does, it's hard to see in this angle, but it adds quite a lot to the design here. The black and purple is something I've really never seen in watches, so I like that. I like the lack of counterbalance on the second hand here too, and that's something I usually see from brands, the German brands like Stoa, and I've never really seen it in a lot of Swiss watches. So I thought that was quite nice. I like the lugs here. The lugs are certainly different. That does create an issue though, as I do think this is a 21mm lug width, which to me is always a little bizarre. I'm not sure why they do that, but this is a 21mm lug width watch. The case diameter is around 40 to 41 millimeters. It's big, but it's certainly not unwearable. It's a nice big bold watch, as the name kind of shows, but it's not unwearable. The thickness, it is relatively thin. I would say it's maybe 11-12 millimeters, maybe even less than that, and it wears quite nicely on the wrist. It's not overly overbearing, but it's also not super small to where you do get some nice presence there. Probably my favorite feature here, and I think you can see it clearly here in the camera, is the fact that the dial itself is brushed, and it's something that really is hard to see unless you shine direct light over it and you move it around like this to show the contrast. But as you'll see, in kind of like when it's on the wrist outside, you don't really see that unless you're really looking for it. And I found that to be really cool, actually. The other thing I really did like is the inclusion of the hash marks here, like you saw in the other ones. The normal museum one don't normally have anything like that, so it is a little difficult to identify the time when you're just glancing at it. But this kind of help. This kind of does help. Kind of just a tidbit here. I did miss out on the Ming release, the recent ones. Well, pretty much all of them. I think they just did a collaboration one, and I missed on that too. And I was kind of bitter about it, and I started looking around for alternatives, and this one actually popped up. I had seen this a while back, but again, it was always sold out, and I couldn't get a hold of it. So I was kind of upset about that, and I thought this would be a nice replacement. And like I said, this did cost me about $95, maybe a little over $100 with shipping, but that's a good deal if you ask me. On that topic, these watches tend to really not hold their value all that well. So to me, if you were to ask me would I recommend a watch like this, it's not that I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend somebody buy this at retail price. I've seen these at Costco, at the mall, at Macy's and things like that, and I've seen them for $300, $400, $500. But if you were to look pre-owned, most of these do go for $150, $200, $300 depending on the model itself. And at that price range, you know, I think you could do a lot worse. If you're a fan of the design, absolutely go for it, because there aren't very many options like that. But if you do like it, then I would say that there really isn't much more in terms of design options, and you can do a lot worse. So let's do some comparisons here on the size. Here's I decided to pull up some similar dress watches, as I think this would be, I guess, a bold dress watch, but a dress watch nonetheless, a three-hander. And I pulled up this date here that kind of has an interesting case, but as you can see, it does look relatively similar. Maybe the Bulova is a little bit smaller in terms of thickness. Again, both quartz watches, both, you know, you're not gonna have a lot of thickness here, but they do wear similarly. And I believe this one is at 38 millimeters, so there's a good reference point there. black dials, similar sizes. And of course I had to get arguably one of the most popular dress watches in the market right here, the Seiko Sarb. And like I said, the Bold might be a tad bit over 40 millimeters on specifications on paper, but as you can see, it certainly doesn't look, at least next to this one, and as you'll see on the wrist too, you don't see it too much. But thickness wise, obviously the Seiko does have a mechanical movement, but it's similarly in terms of thickness. Overall, I think the design of this in and of itself, you're not going to find anything like this, and besides this, I've never seen anything that looks kind of like the Ming, and I think that is kind of a big reason why they've had the success that they've had. So to me, at $100, even if it isn't exactly aesthetically speaking, it doesn't look exactly like it, I think it calls on enough reference to that. I would be interested to see which one was released before, because like I said, there's such a unique design that it would be kind of interesting to know that. But other than that, I'll show this watch on my wrist, and I think that'll be it. Please do let me know what you think of this kind of format of video. If you prefer I go back to something shorter and kind of more concise, do let me know. If you want more detail, I can certainly talk about this all day. So please do let me know in the comments or through Instagram there. Hope you guys enjoyed it.